Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Day for Adventure, the premier outdoor podcast that will get you off your butt and outside. I'm Ben,
I'm Will.
And I'm Trevor.
and in this episode, we will be taking you through what to bring on a day hike. All right, so I guess just to get started, let's jog some memory here. So last episode, we talked about the 10 essentials, which are essentially the things that the U.S. National Park Service recommends that you bring on any outdoor adventure. Just to remind you what those 10 items are, those are number 1, navigation, 2, sun protection, 3, insulation, 4, illumination, 5, first aid supplies, 6, fire, 7, repair kits and tools, 8, nutrition, 9, hydration, and 10, shelter. So, in this episode today, what we're going to be talking about is more in-depth stuff about each one of these things. We'll maybe bring in a couple of our own personal anecdotes and some of our own recommendations on every one of these topics to help you guys out on your first and some of your first hikes. So, let's get started. All right, so number 1 is navigation. Now, when we're talking about navigation, we are mostly looking at map and compass, GPS, and phones. But before we get started with that, I will just start off with my own personal recommendation. Whenever you go on a hike, be sure to bring a map with you. You don't need to bring a compass, but bring a map because it'll help you figure out where you're going, what trail you want to go on. You might choose to do something in the moment. Just bring a map with you. It doesn't have to be anything special. Almost every state park will have simplified maps at their kiosks or at in just like little map boxes at the front offices. So I highly recommend you go check them out. And when you're just starting out, I think these are perfectly acceptable if you're just going to your public parks. So, that being said, navigation, I think, is a dying skill. So, every year, fewer and fewer people know how to actually navigate in the traditional sense. So, when you're choosing your method of navigation, I highly recommend you keep that in mind. Understand your skills before you just jump right in. So let's get kind of into the ideas of these. So first of all, there's the map and compass. It's basically you got a big sheet of paper that has a bunch of lines on it and it has a bunch of things that say this is your trail, right? And you got a compass which points north all the time. So of course, there are some obvious pros to this. First of all, they don't require batteries. They're lightweight, and odds are it's going to work in all situations. Like actually work. The cons, of course, are that it does require a lot of training and practice to use. I have gotten lost many times by my own hand. And as I talked about last time, there were quite a few troubles that I have been through because of a lack of understanding of maps or other such things. That being said, it's really easy to get lost. If you got to be patient with it. If you are trying to rush through it, you're going to get lost. You just are. And when you're learning, you're going to get lost. It's just the way it is. The thing I actually found kind of interesting was that maps and compasses actually can cost a lot of money if you buy up-to-date maps every single time you go to a new place to go get maps. If you get it from a kiosk, don't worry about the cost. It will be free or it will be very, very inexpensive. But if you buy one from the actual like store or go online and get the National Park Service's high-end maps or their GIS maps, you might be running costs as much as $20 or $30 every time. Which brings us to kind of our final point, and that is that. Oh, sorry, William.
Just a topic. Since maps can be expensive, it is recommended that when you head out and are using maps, that you bring some sort of way to waterproof them. This can be as simple as a Ziploc baggie or anything as fancy as an actual map case. If you're going into the backcountry in particular and you're really going to be relying on that map, you want to be able to at least keep it dry. And if you're struggling with that, we do recommend trying to do and have a backup map in case your other one gets damaged.
Oh yeah, yeah. Trevor, you ever gotten a map wet? I know I have. It's not a fun. It's not a fun experience.
Yeah, I've gotten some of the like paper kiosk ones wet, but another big thing, there are some maps that are quote unquote waterproof. Like the ones at Philmont, I definitely had gotten wet and they weren't destroyed, but when they rub together, especially if you like rub your thumb on the front page, the map itself doesn't rip or anything, but the image starts to smear. So that's another thing to be careful for.
Yeah. So it's just a couple of housekeeping things that are really what holds maps and compasses back. The final thing about that is that maps can be pretty inaccurate. When you are using a compass, it doesn't always point directly north. It will sometimes be as far off as like 10 degrees. Like in New Mexico at Philmont Scout Ranch, we found it was about 10 to 11 degrees off of true north. Around here where we live, it's only about 1 degree, but we're lucky. So that's something to kind of keep in mind
Your
when.
higher end maps will actually say it at the bottom and sometimes give you a guide if you're doing the whole multiple miles by just your compass of how far it's off and how much you should counteract that.
Mhm. So in the guide or in the yeah, it's the, what do they call that? The guide,
The
or is it
legend?
the legend? The
I think it's
legend.
part of
That's
the
what they call
legend.
it. Yeah, it should be a part of the legends. So that's map and compass. Of course, you got your second option, which is GPS, global positioning systems. So there's obvious pros to these. First of all, GPSs work almost anywhere in the world. You will always have a very accurate representation of where you are, even if you're out like 40 or 50 miles away from the nearest cell tower or anything, because you're connecting with um, global positioning from satellites, um, which is really awesome. You can get very accurate. Um, they don't require a lot of training to use, which is the part that is really nice for a lot of people. And they're also usually pretty robust. Uh, that's a pretty obvious advantage. But they can be kind of expensive. I did a little research before this episode, and I realized that a good one like that is going to be basically adventure quality is going to be about 150 bucks to upwards of 1 grand in US dollars, that is. So that's it's kind of expensive. So that's something to keep in mind. They do require also a wide array of batteries. It all depends on which one you get. They're starting to go more towards lithium ion, but there are still many that run on double and AAA batteries that you're going to have to keep track of the type of battery you're using. They also really can't take extreme abuse. That means you can't just throw them on the ground like you can a map. But then again, no navigation equipment you should be throwing around. So, also, I have noticed that they are kind of bulky and heavy. So, it's kind of you know, you got to weigh the pros and cons with that. Of course, we are going to finally talk about phones. So, phones are kind of the gift from the heavens, essentially. They Everybody's got one. They're easy as all get out to use. Uh, there are all sorts of apps. I cannot remember anyone's off the top of my head, but there are many good GPS navigation apps. And your phone comes with one or two of them, I believe. Should come with one or two of them. They're also by far the most inexpensive option out of all of them. They're rechargeable. They also, and best part, they double as phones, music players, cameras, flashlights, gaming machines, all sorts of the things that you want when you're out in the woods by yourself. Yeah, so they have some advantages, but they can be very fragile. I have dropped phones before, and I have broke screens. Not as much as some people, but I have done it before, so that's something to keep in mind. They do require power banks as well if you're going to be using it for any extended period of time. And a power bank oftentimes will weigh more than your phone. So I learned that one the hard way the second time I went to Philmont when I brought one of the guys in my trek had a phone for um, camera and flashlight stuff, and I had to carry the power bank, and the power bank weighed 2 times as much as his phone, and it was not even a very big power bank. So that's something to keep in mind. They do rely on cables that can easily get damaged, so that's another thing. So if you get your cables damaged, you're kind of screwed. So um, the other part about it is that they can be very unpredictable because some navigation apps only like to work via um, cell towers as opposed to satellites. So they're not really like a GPS. They're more of a satellite cell tower triangulation that you have to kind of work around. So you'll have to check the app to figure out which type of navigation it uses to figure out where you are. Finally, that being said, with all of that, it can be kind of intrusive. Um, if you're privacy minded, using navigation services on your phone might be a bit intrusive, especially these days. So that's something to keep in mind when you're choosing. So navigation is really important. It doesn't have to be very complicated, but it should be something you think about before you go on your merry way. All
There
right.
is something I'd like to add with the choosing a tool for navigation, and that's when the farther you go into the backcountry, the better it'll be to have multiple forms, so a map and compass and a GPS, as this allows both to have multiple tools to complete your task, and if one is not working properly, it will allow you to at least have a backup.
Yeah, that
As
is a good thing to do. Yeah, always having backups is always good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I guess leading out of the navigation portion moves us into our next essential, which is sun protection. So when we're talking about sun protection, the main one everyone thinks of is sunscreen, just because that's how you keep yourself from getting sunburnt. But it also includes things like hats and sunglasses, just to keep the sun out of your face and out of your eyes, because it can just be a nuisance sometimes if you're hiking towards like the sun in front of you, like it's sunset or sunrise. Um, so you just throw a pair of sunglasses on or a hat. But with sunscreen, the biggest thing to remember is it's important to bring it, even if you don't think you'll need it. So my best example is I've been hiking in the backcountry of New Mexico twice. The first time I went out there, I used sunscreen once when we were in burn country on top of I'm not sure if it was a mesa, but in burn country, all the trees had gotten burned away in a fire in the early 2000s, so there was no shade. So you kind of needed sunscreen. And that was in August, I believe. I went back a second time during spring break, so in March, and I didn't bring sunscreen because in Wisconsin it was still snowing. Um, and when I showed up there, and after my first day of work, I was redder than a tomato because I had just gotten completely burned. Again, I was working in a burned area, so there was no cover, but there was like snow on the radars for the next week, so I wasn't really expecting there to be any problem with the sun, and I got completely burnt and had to drive into town to get what's it called, the green stuff, aloe vera, because it hurt to move when I was
Ooh.
picking up logs and moving around and whatever else I was doing out there. So yeah, the biggest thing is to bring sunscreen. Uh, Even in the winter, sometimes on our Klondites, we suggest that scouts bring it out because the sun will reflect off the snow onto you. Now, have I gotten burnt in the snow? No, but I have gotten burnt a few days before a big snowstorm came through. So
Oh,
it's a good thing to bring.
oh, sorry. Also, if you're gonna be anywhere near the water, or if you're gonna be on the water, like if you're canoeing, kayaking, sailing, whatever, you definitely want to have sun protection because not only does water reflect sunlight, it actually amplifies it like a micro like a magnifying glass. So you will get burned very quickly even when you don't expect it to. So that's something to keep in mind whenever you're out and about.
Yep. And speaking of protecting from the elements, we have our third point of insulation, which is essentially both things that protect from the weather, such as rain gear, are also meant to maintain heat, such as warmer clothes, a winter coat, or a cap. The First off, let's discuss a little bit about rain gear. Essentially, if you're going out, you will want some sort of rain gear. This can be everything, usually a rain jacket to a full rain suit, but you want to at least keep yourself mostly dry. Especially when it starts getting colder out, if you are wet, it is hard to maintain heat. And you can get even hypothermia in 40-degree weather if it's been raining and it's windy, as the rain will get you cold and the wind will wick away your heat. Essentially, you want something to keep you mostly dry.
I have gotten actually hypothermic at 65 degrees before. I think that was when I was doing my OA ordeal, and it was pouring rain all night. It was 65 degrees. All I had was a tarp over my head, and I remember getting hypothermic for the entire night. It was, I can guarantee you do not want to get hypothermic when it's warm outside, because that is like just the ultimate slap in the face, I will tell you. So definitely consider your insulation, consider your rain gear, take it seriously, just do it. That you'll thank me later.
Once you reach full on hypothermia, in which your body starts shutting down, that is, like heat stroke, incredibly lethal, as that is when your organs again shut down because they can't maintain the heat to function. So in exchange of this, you want to keep warm. And in most camping experiences, the weather and the temperature can change throughout the day, which is why you don't just want one big bulky coat, but you want to be layering your clothing so you can reduce the amount of temperature change and maintain a good body temperature. Usually, if you're going for full winter or for a late fall, you'll likely have multiple layers, including a base layer, which is kind of like just your underwear and maybe a undershirt. This essentially helps wick the sweat away from your body. You'll have a few more insulation layers. This is everything from a hoodie to an additional shirt. And then you have your shell, which is your rain gear, a windbreaker. This essentially blocks the rain or the wind from taking the heat away from you. And as the heat changes, you can remove or add on as many as you need. If you're going, even in the summer, it is recommended that you at least have something to help warm you or something you can remove to cool you off.
Yeah, so I actually have a good example about layering if you want to picture it. For me, this is a normal everyday thing. When I would walk from my dorm to my classes, I had a decent amount of a walk up a hill, but I was a big fan of when I was in class, I always like to have a flannel or a hoodie on. So what I always did when I was leaving my dorm was I would get dressed with all my normal clothes, put my hoodie on, and then I would take my winter jacket, which was usually a blue denim jacket with the fluffy insides of whatever that material is, and I would walk to class in that, get to class, take off the outer layer, sit through my class in a nice heated building, and then when I'd leave again to go outside is when you put your outside layer back on. All right, leading from installation, we can go to the next I, which is illumination. So this is just your flashlight, because once it gets dark, you're going to want to be able to see what you're doing. That's just the best way to describe it. So there's different types of illumination. You got your big main ones is just a plain old flashlight, the thing that sits around in your house where you got about 5 of them and none of them are charged or have batteries in them. That thing. Yeah. You got headlamps, which is just a flashlight that wraps on your head. You don't have to use your hands, so you can do stuff with both hands. Common for night hiking is to have a headlamp. And then your phone lights, just because nowadays every phone has a flashlight built in. Personally, my favorite is headlamps, just because it's completely out of the way. And using your flashlight on your phone kills your battery pretty quickly. So that's one thing you definitely have to keep sure of. So phone lights aren't really my favorite. But I got a good story for this. When I was in scouting, I'm still in scouting. When I was a youth in scouting, the flashlight was the thing I just never bring for whatever reason. And I was staffing NYLT one year, and we were walking our teams back to their campsites because they didn't know the camp layout yet. And it was just pouring. So I was leading my team, and they all had their flashlights. So they were pointing it down the trail so we could see where we were going. And when I started leaving, still in this giant storm, I had no light, and I had to run across camp with no light. And it was the lightning that lit up my path to make sure I didn't run into a tree or something. So, yeah. Flashlights are good. Don't follow my lead and not bring it.
I've ran into signposts because I didn't bring a flashlight. It was no moonlight. It was pitch black, and I was trying to make my way back to my site, and I just walked into a sign.
I think, Will, that you were here when I did this one. We were walking at camp, and there was a big sign that got ripped out of the ground for whatever reason, and there was a hole just the size of my foot. So if I hit it at any angle besides directly in the center, I wouldn't have, like, my foot wouldn't have fallen in. Nope, just because I didn't have a flashlight and I didn't see it, my foot went directly into it, and the hole went up above my knee. And then I fell forward on one leg. It was very strange.
Yeah.
Just for a little bit of context, when he says NYLT, he means National Youth Leadership Training. That's actually, I think that was where we all met. Wasn't
I
it?
met Will in middle school, I believe, but yeah, we started hanging out a lot more through NYLT in high school.
I think I was. Yeah, I think that was when we all started hanging. So, yeah, good times. 2014, good times. All right. Well, I guess if we're done with the Illumination, let's get into the first aid supplies. So, I highly recommend that you bring a small first aid kit, also known as FAK, IFAK, whatever you want to call it. It's first aid kit. I think the best things to bring in a first aid kit are really just going to be like, you got to bring some gauze pads, assorted Band-Aids, medical tape, antibiotic ointment, and or wipes. Definitely bring latex gloves or non-latex gloves. Sorry. A breathing barrier is an option as well. Again, it's just protection. If you're going on a hike or if you're bringing a first aid kit for your hike, make sure you have any necessary medications. And then for tools that you put in your first aid kit, keep a set of scissors in there, small notebook, and a pen and pencil. Those are for if you get a bug bite and that bug bite starts to swell up, you want to make sure that you record when you're taking something, or if you take a medication, you want to make sure that you log what time you're taking your medication so that you remember, or when you get to a medical staff in an emergency, you can just hand them your notebook and they can go, "Oh, look, you took your medication. That's good." So that's important. That's a really important thing. Also, I highly recommend a pair of tweezers. Just bring them. Trust me. If you get splinters, if you get ticks on you, all those things, just bring tweezers. They are like the second most useful tool in a first aid kit besides scissors. As for should you bring one, the answer is yes. Do you need to carry it with you on every single little hike you go on? I mean, yeah, I would recommend it. If you're going to just go on a small little hour-long hike and you're just going to circle around back to your car, you can probably keep it in your car. If you really, really don't want to carry it, but I just recommend carrying it because it's not like a first aid kit really weighs all that much. So you don't need much. 2 gauze pads, those are probably the most common things you're actually going to need when you're hiking or when you're out in the wilderness. So just kind of keep that in mind. Keep a good first aid kit. It'll save your butt more times than you would expect. And yes, there are other uses for a first aid kit or the supplies in a first aid kit besides first aid. So yeah. Anybody got any stories about any times they've gotten hurt and not had a first aid kit? Or
I stepped in a hole up to my knee. I didn't have a first aid kit.
I don't have a story, but there are a few things I do want to add. And that's if you're doing hiking, I do recommend some sort of moleskin or even just duct tape, which can essentially be blister treatment. As if you're new to hiking and you're still not used to how to properly take care of your feet or your shoes don't fit properly, it can be really easy to develop blisters or even worse, getting them to pop. Yes, it's painful.
That's painful.
But to treat them and to avoid them,
and they can get infected.
you can use duct tape to create an extra barrier on the skin so it doesn't rub and bubble. And then additionally, if you're going on your own and you want something even smaller, there are small, almost like little personal first aid kits that you can get at Walgreens that can essentially just fit in your back pocket.
Yeah, actually, I did get one of those. Not the small back pocket ones. I got the slightly larger, little mini lunch bag size ones, is what I'd call it. For when I worked at the National Jamboree, my job was to take kids up and down a mountain. So I bought one of those, threw moleskin in it because God, did I need that. And then that's what I had in my backpack all the time. So buying ones from the store are perfectly fine because that one I opened it up and it even had ibuprofen, but aspirin. There we go. It had two different types of aspirin in it, which really surprised me. But then it had all these other basic things, besides the notebook, I guess, which I threw one of those in there as well.
Interesting. I never really got into the like little micro first aid kits. Usually, I've just carried a personal one that I've made. Um, they aren't really all that large. Again, you can carry all this stuff. This is what mine has in it all the time. I don't really carry moleskin mine. Not because I don't think that not because I don't think that I'm not going to get any blisters, but more because I have another tool in my arsenal that I can use to combat blisters, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, so really just bring one. If you're going in a group, have one person bring the first aid kit. It just makes it way more practical. Again, a first aid kit weighs like next to nothing, so just bring it. You'll be fine if you have to carry an extra pound, because it won't even weigh a pound. Odds are. So just get a good first aid kit put together. Odds are you'll probably use next to none of it, but if you do need it, you'll be thankful you have it. So yeah, I think that's really all that there is about first aid kits, to be honest.
All right, then I guess the next essential we'll be moving on to is just fire starting tools. So these ones are really important when you start to go on your weekend hikes or week long hikes because having a fire at night is just a nice thing to have. Also, especially if you are cooking on either a backpacking stove or a camp stove, you have to start those somehow. So the main fire starters we have are matches and lighters. Those are the most popular. Um, Again, they weigh like next to nothing. Matches, you just got to be careful from getting them wet because they are still wood. And you have to make sure that the striker isn't completely used up or they just won't light. Lighters, depending on the ones you have, you have fuel for them. So you just got to make sure they still have fuel in them. But a last thing that not many people think of are just little fire starting, what would you call them, like kits? The one that always comes to my head that we made in Scouts a bunch of time is get a little egg carton, you have wax and cotton and a little string in it. And if you light that, that'll burn for a long time. And that's what you can build your fire around. And the last one, what I was trying to think of was flint and steel. It works. It's really small. It can get wet. It can get hit. It can get thrown. But it's pretty hard to start a fire with. I think I don't use it often, but honestly, I think I've only successfully done it once or twice. So
I would agree with the successfully doing it once or twice, but it's still like my absolute favorite method of starting a fire because when you do it, you just feel like you're on top of the world. It's like I just started a fire with nothing more than a piece of metal and another piece of metal. So
I think it's a good backup. That's what we're gonna put
it's
at
a
it.
really fun thing to do. It's a real cool party trick, but is it practical? No, not with everything else we've got.
If you want something that lasts a while, yes.
Oh
If you
yeah,
don't mind
it'll
taking
last
30 minutes to
forever.
start a fire.
It will last forever. If you got char cloth, it's really
Flint
good
and
to have,
steel
actually.
is good in
True.
more of the survival element. As Trevor said, it's durable. Matches, if it gets wet, they are essentially useless in a lot of cases. In exchange for that, Flint and Steel needs practice and tests your fire building abilities, essentially, as it requires a lot of tinder that is shaped in a way that can catch a spark.
It also could tend to dull knives if you use a knife blade to spark it. So I recommend if you're going to use a knife for it, I recommend you either use a knife blade that you literally do not care about, or you maybe sharpen the spine of a knife, or even just get like a proper sparker or like one of the proper like sawtooth flint
A
sparks.
lot of them come with that. It's just the not losing that part of it.
Yeah, that's the thing is I think I've lost every one of those, and I'm careful with them too.
Put them on a keychain. That's what I figured out because then they're always together and you can
Hmm.
carabine it to something.
Maybe that's out. Maybe that would help out. All right. Well, I guess if we're kind of done with the fire, let's get into the number 7, which is the repair kits or repair kits and other tools. So remember that tool or that part of the first aid kit that I said I don't why I didn't include moleskin, and that there's a reason for that because my first repair tool for hiking is just duct tape. Duct tape is magical. It fixes all sorts of things. It's honestly one of those things that if you're going out on a hike, if you're going to be out for more than a day, bring something or some amount of duct tape. Uh, Put it on. Get one of the like little tiny rolls. You can even roll it up on like your water bottle or on like your walking stick or something like that. I've seen a lot of different methods of carrying duct tape, but it's one of those things that you should have more than you would expect because if you actually need duct tape, it's a lifesaver. If you need to somehow like hold in like a horrible gash or wound for some odd reason that you got hurt that badly, duct tape will save you. There's infinite uses for duct tape, so just carry it. The other tool that I highly recommend that you carry under like all circumstances is a sewing kit. You would be surprised if you break your backpack, you break your clothing, you rip open your clothes, or even if you get like a really nasty gash and you got to hold the skin together. I mean, like, God forbid, a sewing kit can get you through that, even though that's kind of gross and grimy. But trust me, a sewing kit is a really helpful thing to be carrying. Keep a relatively stocked one. It doesn't have to be too complicated. Just a couple of sewing needles and some string. I don't recommend you use your typical like thread to stitch together wounds, but that's just my recommendation. The other thing to carry,
I don't suggest that you stitch together.
I mean,
wounds
that's what duct
personally,
tape is
but,
for.
I mean,
Duct tape is way better at that.
Sure.
That's I'm just saying
what
that's a use I've heard people say, and that's the reason that people tell me I should carry a sewing kit. The other thing to carry is going to be just
Oh boy.
small toolkits for any equipment that you need to carry a kit for. So, for example, if you're bringing a small little like Whisper Light stove, those will usually come with a small little kit with a couple of wrenches, some lubricants, some some screwdrivers, a couple other basic tools to keep the thing running. Odds are you can probably fix any problem with almost any mechanical object you have with the tools in one of these like little tiny micro kits. They honestly weigh next to nothing, and if something breaks, you'd rather not have the situation that happened to me and William. out in the Boundary Waters, where we had both of our stoves not work and no kit to fix the stoves, so we had to cook all our food on fires. So having that was a very interesting experience, and it makes a good story. But also, we could have made our lives so much easier if they had actually given us a toolkit to fix the stoves. Oh gosh, that was a terrible time. Now, I think the final part about repair kits that and like tools that you oftentimes need to bring, um, every list says bring a knife. Now, when it comes to people who go hiking and go camping and go canoeing and kayaking, there's kind of a wide variation in the amount or in the types of people that do that. Are some of them will tell you that you don't need to carry a knife. Others will tell you if you don't carry a knife, you're going to die and you're going to get mauled by a bear. I don't know. Um, all I know is that when it comes to knives, it's all like choosing the type of knife that you want to bring is it can only be recommended by somebody's preference. Um, there is no be all end all best knife in the world. Just understand that. Don't be told by anybody that there's such thing as the perfect knife. That being said, keep it practical. Multi tools for hiking and camping and all that are a really good option. I don't personally like them, but that's just because I like my knives vanilla. Uh, Multi tools can carry all your little tiny toolkit things like your screwdrivers and maybe even a file and a couple of other simple things. Fixed blades. Eh, I like fixed blades. I love fixed blades. They're my preferred kind of knife, or my preferred kind of knife. But they are going to be very bulky, and they are a little bit more taxing to carry around. But they do. They will generally be a lot sturdier, and they'll probably have. They'll be way easier to clean. They're more practical for cooking and other such things. But again, if you're not going to be doing those kind of things, a fixed blade might not be a good option. A folding knife is actually a pretty good tool to have. This can be a single bladed knife like the one I am holding in my hand right now, even though you probably can't see it. These are, yeah.
I hope they can't see it.
Yeah, that's good. These are pretty practical. They're a pretty good choice overall. They might be a little bit. Not everybody likes small single bladed folding knives. They can vary in quality like way too much. I buy good ones, but only like I've lost a lot of knives. I've used a lot of knives. I found that folding knives, like the single bladed folding knives, they vary a lot in quality and their effectiveness overall. So you do have to do a lot of research on folding knives to get a good one. Fixed blades, not so much.
Well, I got one thing just to come into the defense of folding knives because, like, fixed blades are your favorite. I prefer folding knives, mainly because when you do go and do your research and find a nice one, I have had mine. Oh, and you don't lose it. That's the key. But since I've been a second year in Scouts, so that's
Probably about 10 years.
10 years, 8. Yeah, I have had one knife, a nice like probably about 4-inch blade, just a straight blade. I don't like having a
serrations
serration
are terrible.
on it.
Don't get
That's
a knife
just
with
another
serrations
personal
on it.
thing. But anyway, if you keep it sharp, like my assistant scoutmaster bought us all whetstones when we first started doing knives in Cub Scouts, and I've also had that. I might have broke it in half, but I still have it. If you keep your knife sharp and keep good care of it, and I've gone through and I've lubricated the joint. I think I've only done that once though. That should last you forever. Like my blade's great, and my handle is what's starting to fall apart.
I definitely agree that if you buy a good folding knife or a folding knife, sorry, I'm saying knives, not knife. If you buy a good folding knife, you will not be disappointed. A perfect example of a knife that I highly recommend that would be a folding knife is the Kershaw Leak. I bought one for my 19th birthday for myself, and I have been nothing but impressed with the quality. It's got very high quality. 14 CR or CN28 Sandvik steel. So it's the same stuff that kitchen knives are made out of. So it's very, very nice stainless. Um, which again, stainless is kind of a meh for me. I don't like stainless, but Sandvik is probably one of the only exceptions that I will carry around now. But all of my scouting career, I carried around a little Gerber mini fast straw, like the first generation ones. Man, that was a knife that I had a very mixed relationship with. I loved it because it was what I carried with me all the time, but I hated everything about it. So yeah, that knife would not stay sharp. It wouldn't stay sharp, and I carried that thing through 3 years of work as a sailing instructor, and that thing got beaten the crap out of. But I hope one day we do an episode just solely on knives, because I could just talk everybody's ear off about knives. But we got to get moving forward. So, one other thing: big camp tools like hatchets, machetes, fixed blade knives. Don't bring those. Don't buy those unless you are exclusively focusing on camping. Like, you're just going to go camping and you're going to build a camp from scratch. Okay, don't buy into getting all those crazy fancy tools. Or if you like building fires, those are okay then in those cases. But just don't waste your money with those. They're way too heavy. They are very dangerous. They don't give you like any control unless you know what you're doing. Just, I don't recommend them.
Now, after you've done and been using all of these tools, make it a little hungry. And that's where our nutrition comes in. Essentially, if you're going on a day hike, you want some no-cook items that can work as a snack, as a meal if you are going hiking for a long period of time, or if you're going to the backcountry, you'll want about enough food to last an additional day if you get lost. When going for snacks and for hiking food, we do recommend a little bit higher calorie due to the higher physical exertion, and that they are, in general, light and not taking enough space. They should be something that you can throw into your pack, and if it gets thrown around a bit, it's not going to get crushed or squished. I recommend things that are not variable on temperature. For example, chocolate can melt in the summer, and caramel can get rock hard if it's freezing. Essentially, you want to have stuff that can take a beating and can weather the outdoors just like you're going to be doing. In addition to nutrition, we got the other half, hydration. Water is one of the most important things you need to bring on a day hike. In outdoor activities, one of the most common injuries and risk factors is dehydration. Personally, I recommend at least one water bottle, possibly two or more if you are backpacking or going on a longer term hike, and depending on the amount of water you can procure. For the types of water bottles, we can go a little bit more into style. It's up to personal preference and price. If you're going out into the backcountry and you may roughen it up a bit, Nalgene's can take a beating. While they're not indestructible,
I mean, I have
technically, there's a whole thing. The BPA free ones are not as strong as the ones that have BPA in them. Those are stronger. I've seen one get run over with a truck, and the part that broke was the cap, not the bottle. But they don't make those anymore, and they're not that
being
good.
said, even the BPA free ones, I had one of the hard frame blue ones that they have. You can buy them for like $6 too. I have had one of those since I was since 2012. So it's been about 8 years I've had that bottle, and I have thrown it with a full bottle of water at rocks to try and break the bottle. I brought it to the Boundary Waters, thrown it at granite. I have brought it to Philmont twice, and I have thrown it onto limestone and other forms of rock. I have dropped it on concrete. I have done all of those things. The thing looks like it's just beaten up. It's terrible. I can't even put a sticker on it. Like that's like the biggest thing about Nalgene's. You got to put stickers on it. You got to sticker bomb your Nalgene. Like you can tell, like a lot about a person by the stickers they have or the amount of stickers. I can't even put stickers on mine because it's just so ratted up, but it still works. I've changed the cap twice, but the bottle itself is perfectly fine. Best $6 I think I've ever spent.
Yeah, the main thing, all I have to say when it comes to water bottles is Nalgene Superior
Yes,
Race. Camelback, you can fight me or sponsor me. If you pay me, I'll change my mind. But anyway, Nalgene sponsor me.
Oh, and in addition to the traditional water bottle, if you're going on longer term trips or you want to start transitioning from day hikes to backpacking, there are also camelbacks or platypuses that are essentially water bladders that you can use, attach a hose, and usually you can drink more water and hold more water out of it.
I highly recommend that you get a platypus or a camelback, like water reservoir kind of bottle. They are really lightweight, unless you get like one of the Osprey ones that has the full ribbed back and stuff. But they are really lightweight for how much water they can carry. Very practical. I don't think I can recommend them enough. They're something that has saved my butt on so many occasions.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I don't like the water pouches. I prefer 2 or 3 Nalgenes, all of them decked out with splash guards. And honestly, that's mainly because I am bad at cleaning the hoses.
Yeah, you do. They are a pain in the butt. I don't like to find that out
during a hike. So
Yeah,
I stick with my Nalgenes.
With bladders is that they're not as durable and they require more upkeep, as most plastic water bottles are machine washable, and at the very least you can rinse them out with soap and water and you should be fine. Water reservoirs, you have to take some more care into cleaning, as it's a lot easier to develop mold and essentially ruin a water reservoir.
And it's mold in the hose. So if you don't notice it, especially if you don't have one of the ones with the clean tube, you will drink the mold. I can't stress that enough.
I've accidentally done that a few times. My recommendation, a few times.
I did it once and gave up them forever.
I learned the hard way, and that's probably why I am who I am today. But generally speaking, the best way to clean them out, from my experience, is really just to basically take like a clothes hanger or something like that, bend it up, and basically make it so that the pouch itself, the reservoir itself, is opened up. Then for the hose, what I like to do is I like to take a bottle, because I use the platypuses. So I take a bottle and I fill the bottle up with about 10% bleach and about 90% water, and then I just pretty much drain water through bleached water through the hose, let it sit for like 3 hours or even a day in some cases, and the bleach will eat away all the mold. But it is a pain in the butt, and you will not get that taste of bleach out for like 10 runs.
Yeah, I was about to say, then you got to wash it out for another 3 days with just water and maybe a little bit of soap.
Yeah, that is true.
Because if you don't at least wash it out like once or twice, that bleach that'll give you a bad stomach
it will
night.
Definitely do that. But I will say that that from my experience, the pains and the annoyances and the agony is well worth the benefit of just being able to drink just like at all times. You'll just like naturally just go gravitate towards the hose and just start drinking while you're walking. It keeps me way more hydrated than if I was just using Nalgenes. But Nalgenes are definitely for like your electrolytes, like Gatorade, Powerade, drink mix, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Big thing, the hydration packs. I've seen this learn the hard way. I've never done it myself, but I've watched it happen. Never, ever, 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 ever put anything flavored at all. No Gatorade mixes, none of that. It'll never clean out.
Yeah, and if you have to go into bear country, you got to put it in
then
a
you got to
bear
put it in a bear bag,
time.
and it's a whole nother pain.
Horrible. It's horrible if you do that. So don't.
Just water in those.
Just don't put anything besides hydrogen or dihydrogen monoxide. Don't put anything else.
Well, actually, one thing that you could put in there is the
Except
water
for-
purification tablets, but
Yeah,
we're
except for
just
the
getting too
iodine
specific
or
now.
the chlorine dioxide or something like that. So just don't. All right. So I think that's probably all we should talk about hydration, because if we keep talking about this, we'll go on for a rant for about another hour. So let's get into the final topic, number 10, which is shelter. So this isn't really going to apply too much to those of you who want to just do a day hike. But if you're going to do anything outdoor for any longer periods of time, you're going to need to consider how you're going to sleep. Uh, Pretty much the best way of doing it is a tent. A tent, there's all sorts of ways you can do tents. You can buy a tent. You can use, you can buy tents. You can just take a tarp and then make a tent from a tarp. If you absolutely have to, don't recommend it, but you can do what you want. Um, there's bivy sacks and bivvies. Those are more for emergency purposes. They're basically like a sleeping bag liner, but they're completely waterproof. So they do work out relatively well. I've never had to use one or never used one in the past, but it's something I've always wanted to try. Hammocks. Trevor, Trevor, were you the one that was that tried out hammocks, or was that?
I haven't spent a full night in a hammock, but the biggest suggestion I can give is hammocks can actually be very nice because they can be very compact. It's just you have to find right trees that are close enough to each other, and you have to get the rain cover for them. And another very good thing to get is the bug nets that zip on. Those aren't as necessary depending on how the mosquitoes are in your area, but the dew rain covers are necessary because you'll wake up wet if you don't have that up because of the morning dew.
Yeah. I've heard some pretty good things about them. I've heard that people get way better sleep in them, and they don't have to have things like your foam pads and like the same types of equipment. So you can save a little bit of weight, but at the same time, all those other things like your mosquito net and your rain fly and those kind of things, those can add up in weight, and you do have to find good trees. But it might be well worth the.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think overall they will be lighter than your tent, just because the heaviest thing on them is the carabiner. But it's mainly the trees, just finding trees. Because again, you don't need your you don't need your ground tarp, and you don't need your padding because you're suspended in the air. And you can put them pretty high if you want, if you're worried about something walking around.
Yeah, again, I don't have any real experience with them. We never used them in Boy Scouts, and I've never really spent even like any more than an hour in a hammock, but I have heard a lot of very good things about them.
The whole idea of the 10 essentials is to be prepared in an emergency. And as you go on and get better, your tools and gear will increase and will change as your skills increase. But for now, as you're starting out, just follow the 10 essentials and you should be fine. For the next episode, we'll be going into hiking boots. As always, this has been a day for adventure. Get off your butt and get outside.